the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend, the end of our elaborate plans, the end of everything that stands, the end.
Just look at the size and the scope of the forces that we have around the world. And what have you seen happen over the last 80 years? They've declined dramatically. With each passing decade, we've had fewer forces on the ground overseas. Pretty soon, we won't have any in the Eastern Hemisphere, certainly not beyond special forces and special operations forces. So I guess what I'm trying to say is people need to look at themselves from a geographical, historical, and cultural situation. Everybody says, well, America is in retreat, it's in decline. No, we're reverting to what is natural. Our position is in the Western Hemisphere. That doesn't mean we don't want to do business. It doesn't mean that we're not willing to help to some extent, but we cannot maintain a position in Eurasia on land that we did 80 years ago, or 50 years ago, or 30 years ago. It's not possible anymore, nor does it make sense for us to do so. But the whole attempt has been to demonize Russia and China and eventually Iran, these powers, in order to justify massive defense spending in the United States and the commitment of forces overseas. But that's waning. Americans don't really support that. And they have other more important priorities at home. We go back to 1914. The system sort of came into existence or evolved in the sort of 10 to 15 years before the outbreak of World War I into this set of automatic triggers that sent people to war, even though they, at the beginning of it, may not have had any role in it, may not have really been affected by it. So the question that I ask Europeans all the time is, why do you want to be part of alliances that could ultimately drag you into a war that you really don't want to fight, simply because that alliance has theoretically guaranteed your security? The only real guarantor of security for any country is its own people. You know, the Finns are a wonderful example, because the Finns, for years, they could mobilize 850,000 men within the spaces of, say, 48, 72 hours, well-trained, well-equipped, ready to fight. And that operated in their minds as a deterrent. I think it did. I don't think the Russians, after World War II, were interested in going back into Finland under any circumstances. But nevertheless, the Finns were in a position to guarantee their own security. And all of a sudden, at the end of this long period of Soviet-Western conflict, when there is none anymore, decides to join a NATO alliance which has committed itself to a condition of permanent hostility towards Russia. That's insane. It makes no sense. The Swedes are very similar, but the Finns in particular built a very robust guarantee for themselves. My argument to people is that could be done all across Europe. But the notion that you want to bet the farm, as we say in English, on the arrival of U.S. forces in a crisis or conflict from the United States is crazy. Technology has changed. Eisenhower made the comment in 1956, we'll never see another Normandy. If anybody tried to do such a thing, it would be destroyed. What about the Soviet submarines? What about their missiles? Well, those things were primitive in those days compared with what we have today. So the notion that we could cross oceans with impunity and introduce hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million or 2 million troops into the battle, whether it's Asia or Europe, is crazy. It's not going to happen. So why would you want to tie yourself to such an empty guarantee? And I think privately, President Trump feels that way. I know that he felt very strongly that the Europeans should become their own first responders. And I think that's behind his demand for higher defense spending. Unfortunately, defense spending doesn't necessarily equal military capability. What I'm talking about is real military capability the Europeans create for themselves for their own purposes to guarantee their own security. That's what's needed. And there's nothing to prevent people from being what I would call limited liability partners. That means that the Poles cooperate with the Germans or with the Slovaks or with the Czechs or with the Lithuanians for whatever specific purpose. But you don't necessarily sign on for a permanent alliance that triggers automatically a war that would involve you that you don't want to fight. So it is very strange to me with the experience of World War I and World War II, why the Poles and the people in Eastern Europe in general would not understand that and would not seek a different solution from the one that they're part of right now. Trump is someone with a machine gun firing in all conceivable directions. And what he really wants or thinks changes from day to day. He's very impulsive. There is no coherent strategic framework for anything. There is absolutely no understanding whatsoever of Russia or Ukraine or Eastern Europe. It's all very foreign to him. So I don't think we can reach any hard conclusions about what he means. Let's look at what he wants to do. That's what's important. First of all, I think he decided after the Alaska summit that there was really nothing he could do to stand up there and bring peace to Eastern Europe with the cooperation of President Putin and potentially Zelensky and the Europeans. I think he understands now that the Europeans have a different agenda from him. Zelensky has a different agenda, and President Putin's position is unchanging. That's not a problem for President Trump. He recognizes that position is not changing. But he now is frustrated and wishes that he could have staged a wonderful photo opportunity, much like the Alaska event, in the future at some peace summit. That's not going to happen. Remember, President Trump is about optics. This is a pure showman. This is simply the latest episode in the reality TV show called The Trump White House. And he's not going to get the kind of photo op that he wanted, where he could stand in the middle and claim to be peacemaker. So I think he's kind of walked away from it. On the other hand, he still is under enormous pressure from the neocons inside the Beltway. And these are the same people that want perpetual war in the Middle East. They want to balkanize Iran. They want to balkanize Russia. The Russia strategy has failed miserably. So now, they're telling Trump, well, you've got to keep this going somehow. You've got to show that Ukraine is on life support. So give them these cruise missiles. Now, when will these arrive? In what numbers? Will they make any difference? It's hard to tell. And so, of course, that's all nonsense. And the bottom line is, it doesn't matter what you do if you can pinprick strikes with cruise missiles all over the place. Makes absolutely no difference if you're losing the close fight. We have this thing we call the deep fight and the close fight. The deep fight involves these long-range strike weapons, and they're very important. But if you think that you're going to win the war without a close fight, you've lost your mind. Eventually, the ground forces have to collide. Well, they've collided, and Ukraine has lost the close fight. And he doesn't seem to understand the difference. But we shouldn't be surprised by that. This is not someone who has a background in military affairs, international relations, diplomacy, none of those things. This is someone who comes to office as a businessman and sees the world through this lens. That's why we hear constantly about deal, 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 deal. But we don't put together deals on the spur of the moment, and we don't hammer out deals between two people or three people or four people. These things in international diplomacy take months and years sometimes. And then, the ultimate meeting occurs, something is signed and agreed, and everybody can live with it, and you move on to the next item. He has no experience with that, and that's not the way he thinks.